Hello there, it's Matt Lane from Because the Universe here, and it would look again like you have missed one of our episodes. So this is the second episode talking about nuclear power and whether it's worth the nuclear bomb. We hope that you enjoy it.
Your award-winning student radio station.
This is your role.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock on Saturday. You are listening to Because the Universe on Radio at Warwick, your bi-weekly satirical science panel discussion with him, Mr. Harry Manners, the green-fingered generous munchkin.
And he is Matthew Lane, our phosphorus ember, our bismuth, our sweet little vanadium.
What?
I have no idea. It's nice though, right?
It was very nice. I suppose that I really ought to introduce you also to the most important co-host of Because the Universe, because the entire show is his brainchild. It is Ducky, the soft duck,
Absolutely.
who is here in the studio. So there's Mr. Manners. I'm going to be calling you Mr. Manners.
Mr. Manners once again.
Harry, there's me, Matt Lane, and there's Ducky, the soft duck. So, Because the Universe. What is this? This is your bi-weekly satirical science show. Like I said, panel discussion. We have two guests from two different disciplines. We're very excited. We'll introduce you to them later. But what are we going to be doing? Well, let me give you a rundown of what you can expect from us in the next hour.
Lovely.
We're going to start off with a song, some discussion of the news, probably stuff that's been going on in the world that is science related. That should be quite amusing, so you can look forward to that.
Well, hopefully.
Hopefully it will.
With
be,
luck.
We'll laugh anyway.
Yeah.
We'll then introduce the topic, the question that we're going to be answering this week, and the guests. We'll introduce them as well, and we'll start our discussion. We'll then have a bit of a break, continue the discussion before we have a segment called Ask Harry. So that's when we would love it if you could send in a question for Mr. Manners that he has to answer. Something science
Something science related. Any kind of question that you might have always had. Something basic. Why is the sky blue?
Yeah.
Why do magnets work?
Or something
like
really
that.
complicated.
Yeah, or something really mean. You could always send that in too. And then I'm going to have to talk for quite a while.
About 2 minutes. You're going to have to waffle on.
Whether I know anything or not.
And we can pretty much guarantee that you, the listener, will know nothing more by the end of it.
Oh, no. There's no chance that you'll learn anything.
So we'd like you to send in a question for that. Harry, how do people go about contacting us? Just give us a question.
Well, we have 3 modes of contact. You can get in touch with us through Facebook. So we have a page called Because the Universe. So that's Facebook.com/Because the Universe. You can also get in contact with us via email. So we have becausetheuniverse@aol.com. We also have our Twitter handle, which is @CosTheUniverse. That is COS, Cos the Universe.
That is right. So that is how to get in contact with us for the Ask Harry segment. That will be happening at the end of the show. But let's get right down to it. Harry, shall we discuss some of the science-related news that has been going on in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, sure. So quick highlight. We've got 2 main stories. Probably heard all about it. We've got ESA. The European Space Agency has landed a spacecraft on a comet.
Ooh.
Indeed. Lots of stuff about that. There's also another little story going around, which is that the discovery of the Higgs boson, announced 2 years ago, has been thrown into doubt by the publication of a recent paper.
Ouch.
Yes, indeed.
So we're going to come back to both of those because they both merit some
a little bit of intrigue,
fleshing out proper discussion. I've got some riveting news.
As always.
If you tuned in last week and you heard my news, you know what to expect.
Yes.
More of the same. A glass of wine keeps heart disease away, or does it? We've all heard that saying, a glass of wine a day is good for the heart.
Well, I hope so.
That sort of saying.
That's what I've been going on for quite some time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We all like the phrase everything in moderation, and we all use this thing about a glass of red wine to drink more wine. Unfortunately, a recent study has come out that says there's a genetic marker that you need to have in order for a glass of wine a day to be good for the heart, and only 15% of us have this marker.
Don't play with my world.
I'm sorry, Harry, but it's true. Only 15% have this marker.
That's just not acceptable.
You have to cut down the wine.
I can't.
Don't worry.
Look, there is a non-zero chance that I have that marker, and it's not worth the risk of putting my health in jeopardy just in case I might have it.
Do you realise that if you don't have the marker, which is far more likely, then drinking wine is bad for your health? So I'm not sure what you just said is true.
I'm allowed to be irrational because I'll be drunk.
Okay, fine. But do remember, like we said last week, the Australians are developing beer that won't get you so drunk.
Excellent.
So
okay,
just
so there's a
switch to that
fail-safe
instead of the wine.
Yeah, there we are.
Another one. Now, Mr. Manners, I know that this is an issue close to your heart.
Go on.
I know that you have been worrying about this for about a year now.
I am a warrior.
You are a warrior. But this has been So don't get emotional on me.
Okay.
I've got some titles
I'll
here.
brace.
I've got some titles of some articles that came out this week.
Go ahead.
Decades-old virus behind devastating sea star epidemic.
No.
In search of the starfish killer, the quest to save the original keystone species.
God, the starfish.
Scientists solve mystery of West Coast starfish plague. Mystery illness that melts starfish identified.
Thank God. I mean, you know, I've been combing the seafronts, looking
try
for
and
the
work out what it
jellified
was.
starfish.
But don't they all sound like film titles?
They do. They should be read out in that trailer man's voice.
In search of the starfish.
This summer.
Yes. Oh dear. So, but this is a serious thing. Actually, I know we're taking the mick out of it because it's
Quite funny.
worthy of taking
Yeah.
the mick. But it is slightly serious. Basically for the last year, people have been noticing that there is this mysterious syndrome that is stripping the Pacific Ocean of its sea stars. And they die horrifically. This is the description of their death. They develop lesions and lose arms until they eventually disintegrate, leaving behind nothing more than their calcium-based skeleton.
That is quite horrific.
This is from another article. There's a guy called Steve Fradkin, who's one of the guys that is involved in sorting this out or whatever.
All these guys always have amazing
Best
names, by the way,
aren't
don't
Fradkin. In June 2013, Steve Fradkin stumbled upon a grisly scene at Starfish. This should be read in, this
summer.
I know.
Yes.
In June 2013, Steve Fradkin stumbled upon a grisly scene at Starfish Point in Washington, northwest of Seattle. About one in 4 of the park's namesake animals were contorted and covered in white lesions. The seriously sick starfish were crumpled and sagging, their internal organs beginning to rupture through their skin.
Oh.
But that wasn't what stuck with Fradkin. When I spoke to him a year later, I didn't speak to him. This is the person that wrote the article. What really affected him were the arms that had ripped loose from the animals' bodies. There were individual arms just roaming around in a Walking Dead kind of way, he
That's
says.
quite a horrific picture. I'm worried for his mental health.
Walking Dead starfish
Walking Dead
arms.
starfish. I mean, what are his dreams like?
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. And then I actually have a serious news story, Harry.
What? That's
I know.
not part of the deal.
I know, I have a serious news story. It's the G20 summit,
Oh, yes.
right? And it was in Australia, and more than 400 Australian protesters went to the beach and stuck their heads in the sand to mock the government's reluctance to put climate change on the agenda.
That's excellent.
Totally worth doing. And
Yes,
we are being
yes,
serious now.
Certainly. We're all for this.
We are all for this because Tony Abbott, Prime Minister of Australia, it's really annoying because we have to not be biased and things like that.
Indeed.
And
Yes,
can't
we
be rude.
announced that we
he's
are
an
completely
idiot.
unbiased.
It's ridiculous. He, in 2009, said that climate change science is crap. Apologies for that, but I'm quoting. And he said that coal was good for humanity.
Good for humanity. Well, it is in a way, but not in a... Let's ignore all of the death and destruction that it causes.
So to you 400 Australians who went and buried your heads in the sand, thank you. Thank you from Because the Universe.
Thank you indeed. Ducky says thank you.
Ducky says thank you. On the note of the Australians and this summit,
Yes.
did you see the photos that went viral
I
of
did.
the world leaders holding koalas?
Oh, I believe I may have seen these.
They're
yes.
hilarious.
Yes,
Barack Obama looks so happy.
It's
He always looks
mindless
happy,
glee,
though.
isn't it? Well, yeah,
It's
I mean,
brilliant.
somehow holding koala just accentuated his natural coolness.
So this is at the G20 summit. The idea being you can't go to Australia without holding a furry animal. So all of the world leaders were given koalas to hold.
Of
If
course.
you cast your mind back 2 weeks ago, we had a news story about
We
a koala
did.
chlamydia trial,
Yes.
right, that was happening in Australia because apparently koala chlamydia was
Is rife.
ravaging
Yes.
the marsupial.
Completely destroying the wilderness. Yes.
I think that was a hoax. I think they haven't got a cure, and I think that Tony Abbott is trying to infect the world leaders
so
with
it was a
koala
ploy
chlamydia.
to lure the world leaders
Yep.
into one place so they could infect the entire world leadership with
Yes.
chlamydia.
Yes.
Koala chlamydia at that.
Indeed, and then
Yes.
he's going to roll out coal power to the world. because it's
But
good for
they
us.
may have the vaccine after all. It could be a
Yeah.
double bluff. And then, can you imagine the world leadership all infected and the Australians are the only ones with the cure?
Oh my word!
I think we've run across something there.
I think we have. I think we should contact.
Yes.
Anyway,
yes.
Enough
Moving
of that.
on.
The last thing to say is the French are contemplating dynamiting a dead whale over fears that it could explode. There's a quote online from an article about it. It says, "But we all know what happens when we start jabbing things into dead whales." Got to be honest, haven't done that. Don't know what happens when you jab a dead whale with.
Do you not, Matt?
No.
Have you not lived?
I have obviously not lived.
Evidently not.
Harry, before we talk about more seriously some of that other space-related stuff, shall we break for a song so that we can bring the guests in to talk about space?
Let's talk. Yes. Let's go for a little bit of a song. Okay, so first up we have Listen to the Man by George Ezra.
12:51 a.m.
Welcome back. This is Because of the Universe. We are on Raw. So, Matt, what have we got lined up?
So I'm going to introduce the guests.
Lovely.
We're then going to have a little chat about those slightly more important news stories. Not that the other ones weren't important. Well, they weren't. But we'll have a chat about the more important news stories. And then after that, we're going to introduce this week's topic, which is very, very exciting.
Lovely.
So, guests. It was wonderful with that George Ezra song playing. I don't know if you noticed, Harry, but everyone's heads were kind of...
Just a little bobbing, just a little bit.
It was quite amusing.
It was quite
anyway,
nice.
Over to the guests. We've got two wonderful guests. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, give us your name, your year, what you're studying, and a truth and a lie. Starting with you, William.
Hi, I'm William. I'm a first-year classicist. My truth is, I broke my arm during a football game and finished the game.
Right.
And the lie, which I wasn't meant to read out.
Yeah, I'm thinking you're not meant to tell us.
You've misapprehended the game.
I've slightly screwed that up. I was South England chess champion in 2013.
So let's guess which one is true.
Let's guess which one.
Because I haven't told you.
Was the truth a truth or the lie a lie?
Ooh.
I don't know.
Am I double bluffing you?
Well, you're not a PPE or philosophy student, so you shouldn't be playing tricks on us.
No.
I'm going to go with the lie being a lie. And
I think I'm going to have to go with the lie being a lie.
Are we right?
You are correct.
Okay,
genius.
Great. And Tom?
I'm Tom.
Don't tell us which one is true.
No. See, I've got three, so just to make it even more confusing for you.
Great.
Wonderful.
Great.
I wouldn't do that to you, Matt.
Oh.
I'm Tom, second year physics student, so almost as interesting as these two co-hosts.
I know 3 physicists.
It's gonna be a long hour.
Yeah.
We
apologise in advance.
Truth and lie in no particular order. I once spent 21 hours straight with 3 friends playing video games non-stop.
That is believable.
That is definitely believable.
That is
University
believable.
student. I know people who've done
I
much
think I've
longer
done
than
that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, probably.
And when I was 4, I got lost on an old German battleship when I was in Germany with my parents.
That's awful. Also believable.
Ooh.
That's tough. That is tough. Because, this kind of hinges on the fact is if he's a gamer, it's entirely believable.
Yeah.
If he's not, it could be the
do you have any insight?
I can't think of a lot of German battleships
I see.
that you're allowed to go around from having visited Hamburg, where I would expect there to be one, and there wasn't.
Also, how big are German battleships?
He was only 4.
I see. Must have seemed much larger.
Yeah.
It was a tour. It was rather scary as a 4-year-old in small confined spaces.
Is he just saying that to try and convince
he
us?
could
That
be.
could be a complete... Okay.
I think that the first one is a little bit too pedestrian to say as a truth. So I'm going to say the battleship
I'm
is
going
the
to say
truth.
the battleship is the truth.
Actually, it's the gaming which is the
Oh,
truth.
we should have listened
We
to
should've.
William.
I got lost on a German submarine when I was 4, so I changed that to a
course.
battleship to make it a lie, because I couldn't think of a good lie.
Clever thing.
That's really annoying.
You
Anyway,
got lost on a submarine. I mean, they're even smaller.
Yeah, that was
Well done.
very terrifying
Well
as a
done.
4-year-old.
Well done. That's an achievement.
maybe not well done. Anyway, welcome. Thank you very much for coming
Indeed.
on.
Thank
And
you.
let's just go back and briefly talk about what's been going on with space recently.
Yeah, so, as we said, European Space Agency has landed on a comet. So this is a mission which was planned over 25 years ago, launched 10 years ago, and has been carried on the Rosetta spacecraft, slingshotting gravitationally around planets again and again and again, until finally it comes around into the correct orbit. So a few days ago, we had the spacecraft separate, which is called Philae, and the approach was made to the comet, and unfortunately the harpoons and thrusters failed to fire, which resulted in the entire spacecraft bouncing a kilometre into the air. I say air, into hard vacuum, of course, and then coming and sitting askew on 3 of its legs in partial darkness at the edge of a crater. So unfortunately, that meant that the solar panels weren't exposed to sunlight, and the spacecraft has since fallen into an idle mode, out of power.
It's sleeping.
But it is very important that we mention that all of its primary objectives were carried out on battery power, and it beamed them all back to Earth, and the mission is a complete success.
Yes, it did. It did indeed record the smell of the comet.
It did, and a bizarre echo inside the comet, which is important, I feel. That was worth the 25 years to find that, there's a bizarre echo.
And the smell.
And the smell.
Totally worth it.
The smell, yes.
We shouldn't belittle it, though.
No, an outstanding
It is
achievement.
quite an achievement. And obviously, when an achievement like this happens, there is only one thing that you should talk about, which is the clothing choices of the scientists.
Oh,
Who
of
saw
course.
this?
He looked a bit like our Tom Hayes in his
He did.
colourful shirt.
Yes, I was about to mention that myself, in his Hawaiian shirts. Yes.
Right, so the doctor from ESA
Yes.
that did a lot of the talking about this was wearing a shirt made for him by a friend. And on this shirt, there were scantily clad women.
I was very offended. I don't know about you, Matt. It offended me greatly.
I couldn't look. But to be honest, when you say scantily clad, and that is the nomenclature, posted around, they weren't scantily clad.
No, they weren't. That was the thing. I zoomed in on this shirt as well.
Well, of course you did,
yes.
Matt.
Okay, a little bit of background. The reason why I zoomed in is because there was a massive media storm. It was like Watergate, but Shirtgate, where groups of feminists attacked him for his choice of clothing.
Yes,
because it was offensive. Forget the fact that he'd landed on a comet.
A comet, yeah.
Forget any of that.
Forget making history.
Forget also that and I know this is subjective, but forget also that the shirt wasn't really...
No, it wasn't.
It was just that shirt.
It wasn't overt.
It confuses me slightly.
No.
Now, I'm all for feminism. I am all for equality.
I'm for equality,
I think we all are.
Yes.
Exactly. So I think we just ought to be really clear about that. We're certainly not saying that we're not for equality. And
not at all.
We would probably also say that we would all like to see more female scientists, that there is some disparity in this, and it's a bad thing.
It's a huge issue in our current culture, yes.
However,
yes.
The memes are going crazy. We should be able to wear what we want without being objectified. That's the feminists. Landed a great spacecraft on a comet. That's him forced to apologise because his shirt offended the feminists. There's hypocrisy going on. This has become a bit ridiculous. Here is a quote from Stephen Fry that I think sums everything up that we might want to say on the matter. It's now very common to hear people say, "I'm rather offended by that," as if that gives them certain rights. It's no more than a whine. It has no meaning. It has no purpose. It has no reason to be respected as a phrase.
I'm very fond of that quote, and I think
I missed out the swearing.
Yes, indeed.
Next,
as you know, I'm quite a purporter of that way of thinking.
Yeah. So, just to reiterate, we're all for equal rights.
We're
not moaning about that.
But come on, world.
Come on, world. Let's
this is absurd.
Stop the idealism and start making a difference instead of a noise. I think is the kind of thing that might.
We just landed on a comet.
Yes, we did.
Well done. There's also another story, as we mentioned. The Higgs boson has been thrown into doubt as being discovered. So in 2012, the CERN LHC experiments released the announcement that they had discovered the Higgs boson after almost a decade search. So a recent paper has come out challenging this claim. So it's arguing that the data is in fact a resonance, representing something in certain models called a technicolor resonance. So it's a different kind of Higgs particle, which would be actually made up of more fundamental particles. So, of course, this is all very speculative, but it has thrown the discovery into doubt. It does highlight the media's tendency to latch on to announcements as hard, incontrovertible discoveries.
It does.
Which is just not the case, especially in modern particle physics. Things are much grayer than that. But even if this would throw the whole thing into doubt, throw the whole thing askew, even if they had to throw the discovery out the window, it would lead to something being necessary called the technicolor force in the new models. So we would then have to start a new search for this extra force.
Do they sing songs in musicals about this technicolor force?
I think that's in the pipeline. Yeah. Stay tuned.
Okay.
I'm sure they'll be coming.
Good. Yeah. Good. It is worth saying, as physicists, that it's it's quite aggravating that we said we discovered the Higgs. No, what CERN have said every single time is they discovered a Higgs-like particle.
Yes,
Exactly.
a prominence.
This is not a criticism of CERN.
No, whatsoever.
And-
This is more of a criticism of the media's relation between academic science and the public. Because it is it is the only primary channel that most people get to hear about actual science going on, and the level to which it's misreported and blown out of proportion and simply just got wrong.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of this science, people don't even bother to look it up, it seems, in a book. You just read out any old thing.
A book.
What's a book?
Ooh.
A book.
I've got a screen in front of me. It tells me everything I need to know.
Well, yes, you may remember them. Fellow elderly people.
Oh, you are so old.
I am old, yes.
Harry,
Yes.
shall we just go to another song before we introduce the topic?
Righto, let's go to another song. So we're going to go to Torn Apart by Bastille.
Your student radio station on 1251 AM.
This is your rock.
Welcome back. This is Because the Universe. So, just to give out our social media one more time, we have 3 modes of contact. We have an email address, becausetheuniverse@aol.com. We also have a Facebook page, facebook.com/becausetheuniverse. We also have a Twitter handle. So we have @CosTheUniverse, COS, CosTheUniverse. Matt, I think it's time to introduce a topic.
Indeed it is. So do get in contact with us for the Ask Harry segment later on. Send us in a question for Harry. But now we're going
Absolutely.
to introduce the topic, which is very exciting. Guests, are you ready for the topic for this week?
No. Yes. Maybe. Not sure.
Well, we're going to
Definitely
introduce it
maybe.
anyway.
Because you definitely don't already know what it is.
No.
No, not at all.
So I'm going to take Ducky the soft duck to
Oh,
my
yes.
ear, and he's going to tell me what our question is. For
Viewers,
this
if
week.
you're looking on the webcam, you can see live Ducky talking to Matt, introducing the topic.
Right, that's very interesting. Thank you, Ducky.
Ah,
Okay. Oh, yeah.
oh good.
Right. So thank you, Ducky. We have a topic. Are you ready? We have a question.
yes.
Okay.
Is nuclear power worth the discovery of the nuclear bomb?
Wow.
Oof.
That's a heady topic.
Oof.
Indeed, big one.
So we have Tom here, who is a physicist. So obviously you have many things to say, Tom, as a physicist. We
Whether
also
they're
have-
right or not is a
well,
different issue.
Yes.
We also have Will, a classicist, who seems to have a deep and keen interest, having spoken to you, in the sciences and also in what I would call the study of ethics.
Yes, I think that's probably a fair assessment.
But I'm not going to go to either of you. I'm instead going to go to Mr. Manners. Mr. Manners, since you are an old man,
Thank you for bringing that
were
up once
probably
again.
alive back when they were discovering nuclear stuff.
No, in fact, I remember the discovery of coal.
Ah.
Yes, I remember them bringing that bizarre black rock up out of the ground. Yes.
Tell us, what do you think?
What do I think? I mean, personally, I feel that it's absolutely worth the discovery because it's almost an inevitable discovery. The power of the atom is a natural consequence of the natural development of, the laws of quantum mechanics and so forth. So we were going to have to deal with this kind of moral quandary at some point. And I feel that it coming along at the state of affairs as they were in the mid-20th century was almost the most stable period available. We had immediately after the Second World War, the old empires had disintegrated. It probably was the state of affairs being as they were, which meant that we were able to survive the Cold War and so forth, and bring about the kind of non-proliferation attitude that we have today.
So that really, it was always going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
It was probably going to happen around wartime.
Yes, absolutely.
Because war and science have an interesting relationship in general anyway.
They do, yes.
That meant we were always going to have to ask
You were going to make
question.
leaps and bounds at some point.
Yeah.
I do feel that just having a major world conflict and having kind of a dissolution of the major powers meant that no one was really in a position to take it to the point at which they could have destroyed the world, essentially.
Yeah. Well, obviously a lot more will be said about that, I expect.
Yes.
I can see Will moving towards his mic already.
Well, yes, I would say I have 2 points on this. You couldn't be regressive with science. You can say if we had this, we wouldn't have this. If we had this, we wouldn't have this. All the way back to we've got fire, so we can forge a sword. It's not if we want to advance as a people and science as a discipline, we have to take the negatives with the positives and deal with the negatives in a political way rather than in a scientific way.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that the problems I was going to raise, especially with the nuclear weapon, I think it was important that the nuclear weapon was used. The horror of Hiroshima, when we only had one, meant that it wasn't going to be used when we had 1,500.
One relatively small one. That's the thing.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, if you
saying.
look at the yields of those bombs, they are minuscule compared to the modern nuclear arsenal.
Yeah, but the thing with that was people saw that, and it's like when people go now, well, it's 50 times Hiroshima, and that horrifies even world leaders to the extent that held people back in the Cold War.
Yeah.
And I think that one use, in many ways, saved the Cold War from becoming a hot war.
Yeah, so I've just thought of this. This may be a terrible parallel because I've just thought about it now.
Right,
But I'm going to draw a parallel. Space exploration at the moment, a lot seems to be going wrong. You've got stuff bouncing, you've got all the explosions we talked about.
It seems everything's going awry.
Everything seems to be going wrong, and yet all of the leaders of the private enterprises, or of ESA or NASA or whatever, they're all being really positive and saying, we're going to launch these satellites, we're going to do this, we're going to roll this out, this is exciting. That is because space exploration is a frontier. We don't know what we are doing.
No one's ever done this before.
It's going to go wrong because there is no wrong. There is only discovery.
Yeah. And also there's a huge amount of effort going on.
Yeah.
You know, because there is so much effort going into this, of course things are going to go wrong. It seems everything's going badly because these projects take a long time to come to fruition.
And we didn't know what we were doing. There's a similar sort of rhetoric here. We didn't know what we would do. When we're coming up with these things, when we're designing these things, when we're learning this new physics and we're having to try and apply it, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in the same way that you do with hindsight.
I completely agree. And on the sort of science politics things, what I was trying to say was science makes a discovery. That's science's job. Politics' job is to come along behind it and go, how are we going to use this?
Oh, there's so much to say
Yes,
on that.
that opens a whole can
we're
of
keeping
worms,
that to
doesn't
the
it?
second
Yes.
section of the
Okay.
show. So we're going to come back to the relationship between science and politics and policy of discovery and all of that. But Tom,
well, I think you raised an interesting point actually about use of nuclear weapons at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and about how horrific they were and how they dissuaded everybody from ever wanting to use them again. It's synonymous almost to plane crashes and nuclear accidents, in the sense that they're spike events that people take great note at, and when you analyze them in comparison to similar things like car accidents every year and the amount of damage caused by coal power plants and the amount of number of people died, say, in the US bombings of Tokyo during the Second World War, nuclear weapons and nuclear power plant meltdowns aren't that serious.
Yes.
The US bombings of Tokyo at the end of the Second World War was estimated to be almost 200,000 people, which is over 3 times the number killed at Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined.
Gosh.
That's incredible.
Cars, we killed 2,000 people.
Flesh out the car-aeroplane analogy.
Well, if you have a plane crash and you kill 300 people instantly, if it's a Boeing 747.
And people panic.
And people panic, and people say, oh, I'm never going to fly again, and then get in their car and drive down to the shops. 2,000 people in the UK, which has a tiny population on the world scale, 2,000 people every year die, at least. And another 20,000 people suffer major injury. And people don't take note of that.
So your statistical risk when you get in a car is so much greater
than if you were to take a plane. But because it's a slow trickle of death, essentially.
So there's something very profound here, which is our perception of risk compared to actual risk.
It is a fundamental human psychology, isn't it? That we perceive immediate danger
to be more dangerous.
Intrinsically, yes, more dangerous
than progressive, slow danger. Exactly.
So that is a very good place to start talking about nuclear power.
Yes.
Before we start talking about the risks or any of the disasters, accidents, things that have happened like that, Tom, would you as a physicist be able to flesh out for us, please, what's going on in a nuclear power plant? I'm aware that you actually have a second year module that has spent about 10 lectures covering this.
Well, I'm also aware that you also spend the same number of lectures doing that.
We won't mention that. Tom.
So I mean, nuclear power is fantastically safe compared to most other compared to most other power sources
But if
like
you could,
coal and oil.
for any non-scientific listeners that we have, describe the mechanism.
Okay, so
Draw us a diagram.
draw a diagram.
This is radio, so
Yes.
don't draw.
No, don't.
I'll draw with my hands, and people on the webcam can see.
Oh, lovely.
So you dig up out of the ground uranium, which most people know of. It's radioactive.
Yes.
And then you put it in a reactor, which is a large, normally large thing,
Yes.
which is mostly concrete, with pipes of water or gas, which conducts heat. So you put your uranium in there, and then you pass water or some other special material through, which means that the radioactive property of the uranium makes it heat up. I don't want to go into too much science because people will fall
we are
asleep very
simplifying this
quickly.
rather a lot, but I think he's doing rather well.
That is very, very good.
Yeah, radioactive elements heat up and get more and more unstable if they're close to other materials.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, water is a common one.
Is a good one.
So that heats up. You then heat up the water. Water then evaporates and drives turbines, and you get electricity out of that. And the water part is exactly the same as you would have in a coal, oil, or any other kind of power station. It's just the uranium that you're
So it's our
burning.
heat source here.
So you've got this block of uranium, and unlike coal, you haven't set fire to it.
No.
It's producing heat by some other mechanism that we're not going to talk about, just because
Science.
physics.
Yes.
Take too long.
I mean,
People
this is
fall
a science
asleep.
show,
Yes.
but there are some other things that we want to get. William, you seem to be wanting to
The
speak.
thing I was just think we should make clear is that the water that you see piling out the top of these
Yes, it's
Nuclear power
the
stations,
cooling towers.
the
yes,
cooling
yes.
towers is actually water that's been put through pipes through the hot water.
Yes.
Yes,
not
it's
the
completely
same
not
water.
radioactive water.
Just-
Isolated secondary system.
Yes.
Yes.
I just think
that is a good. No, it's a good point.
And
It's
lots
worth
of
raising.
people, on the point of cooling towers, people look at a nuclear reactor and see these huge cooling towers and say, look at the amount of pollution
Yes,
it's putting
all
into
the
the air.
emissions.
It's about 0.1 of a similar sized coal plant.
But
Absolutely,
these
yes.
huge cooling towers are actually just emitting water vapor
vapor,
like
yes.
your kettle would.
Yeah, so that's 0.1 of the greenhouse gases.
Which is amazing.
0.1%, sorry, not 0.1 because that'd be 10%.
0.1.
I mean
Yes.
0.1%.
We know maths.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what's going on. So really, we need to ask why the panic.
Well, again, like plane crashes, I guess. You've got things like Chernobyl, which most people have heard of as a nuclear accident. 3 Mile Island, which is a bit older, which was in the US, and Fukushima, which
More
is the
recently,
most recent one, which was
But
in Japan.
why? Why does this happen? What's going on?
I think it's a fear of the unknown and the unseen. If you get attacked by a mugger in the street, you can see where his fists are, and you can run away. Radiation has that thing of being, you can't see it, you don't know it's there, and it kills you in a particularly horrible way.
Yeah.
And people don't seem to understand it.
No, I think that since its discovery, it always has been something that has been misreported. Something
I'm
very,
a
very
bit
poorly
worried.
communicated to the public.
I'm worried. I'm very worried. I think we're guilty of that. Us right here, right now.
Yeah.
We've just
Absolutely.
given a really terrible description of the mechanism that's actually going on in a nuclear plant. So let's spend no more than, say, 4 minutes.
Yes.
What's actually going on? What is actually going on? Uranium. You have different isotopes. That means they have different atomic masses. So there's different numbers of the constituent particles in these atoms that mean they have different masses. Chemically, they're the same. They behave in the same way, but you have these different isotopes. You dig it out the ground, it's mainly one isotope, not the other. Right?
Yep.
What's actually happening that produces heat is these atoms, the nucleus, which is where all the mass is really big. It's so big that it's unstable when it splits into 2 smaller ones. In the process, some of its mass is turned into energy. That energy is going to probably be in the form of heat. So you get all of this heat because it's splitting.
And
However,
that's what we want.
That is what we want.
That's
But
what we want.
the isotope that is in the ground is not one that splits.
Yes, almost all of it is completely harmless.
It doesn't do anything.
And entirely pointless and annoying for the purposes of most.
Exactly.
Yes,
Because
as
it
far as
doesn't
we're
split.
concerned, we
You
don't want
can't
it.
get your
It's just
heat.
a block of stuff,
Yes.
which isn't
So
going to
it's
hurt
some
anyone.
metal.
This is why you hear the phrase refining.
So
Yes,
enrichment,
indeed.
enrichment is the thing. That is what is going to link the nuclear power to the nuclear weapon.
Yes, indeed.
So I just want to cover this little bit of physics as quickly as we possibly can.
We are running out of time already.
I know we are.
Yes.
It's crazy. Where's the time gone? So you have to do this thing called enrichment. You basically separate the two masses, and you keep doing that over multiple iterations. So the stuff you get out at the end has the isotope, the mass that will split, that will be fissile,
Yes,
that will give out
at a
this
greater
heat.
proportion.
That is the stuff that you put in your reactor. Now, 90%, it has to have 90% of the fissile stuff in order to be weapons grade.
Yep.
The stuff that goes in a nuclear power plant is, what is it, it's like 7%?
3%. I
Yeah.
think it normally
Three.
it's 3.
Is it
Yeah,
only
because
3?
naturally it's 0.7%, and usually in enriched plant it's 3.
And then it
3
goes
to
up to 3.
5%.
3 to
So
5, yeah.
That's not a lot. So that's what's going on. The concern then is if this thing goes runaway, there's always a chance. I mean, there actually isn't in reality, but kind of theoretically,
People think it will blow
there's a
up
chance
and
that
you'll
this
get a
thing
large
could just
mushroom
go
cloud.
crazy. It could
Yes.
turn into a bomb. There could be no level of control. There could be no control mechanism, and the whole thing will explode. And it will release the radioactive. Do you remember I said about how your atom splits into two smaller atoms?
Yes.
Those two smaller atoms are they're the bits that are nasty. They produce nasty radiation. It will release this cloud of that, which
Yes.
would be like a bomb. That would be bad.
It
So
would be bad.
that's the concern.
And that's what happened at Chernobyl, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that it
But
went too
why
quickly.
did it happen at Chernobyl?
Well, in all three cases I spoke about earlier, it was all human error.
It was not physics.
It was
No, absolutely not.
It was not the science.
No, the science is fundamentally secure. So as long as you have correct oversight, you have good maintenance of your power
Good
plant, nothing
management.
should ever go wrong. Yes, good management
In
as
terms
well.
of the way these things are built, the hotter they get, and they slow down and switch themselves off. So
Yep.
they shouldn't explode.
The thing I think, well, we could go slightly deeper into the science just for a moment, is the idea that each one sets the next one off.
Yep.
By releasing a neutron.
Yep.
I wait for the physicist to correct me.
No, you can't.
absolutely.
And
We've now spent more than 4 minutes on
sorry.
physics.
And the ability of putting in, we can put in another substance called a control rod to absorb these neutrons to stop
Yep.
the chain
So
reaction.
the point here is we have, if you're
Myriad
doing it right,
control
you have complete
mechanisms.
control
Yep.
over what this thing is
Yep.
doing. So I'm just, because we're running, oh my word, we're running out of time. I just want to give you some examples. This is just to show that if you compare coal to nuclear or something like that,
Okay.
then just like Tom was saying about this aeroplane and car analogy, the nuclear power plant is like the aeroplane and the coal power plant is like the car. It's far more dangerous, just it's kind of spread out. So we have this example of Fukushima that happened in Japan, and just after that they started closing down their nuclear plants and they had to replace them with coal plants. So what they did was they increased their coal generation by 57 terawatt hours, natural gas by 58, and oil by 9. And it's reasonable to assume they did the same in 2012. Now, if you do some statistics here, then what that means is that due to coal, over that 1.5 to 2 year period, there were an additional about 2,700 deaths plus 25,000 serious ailments. For gas, it's 350 deaths, 3,400 ailments. Oil, 340 deaths, 2,900 ailments. If you look at if Fukushima hadn't gone wrong, if it had been fine and it had just stayed there, that would have been an additional 13 deaths and 54 serious ailments. Now, what this adds up to is a total of, are you ready for this?
Go on.
Because they didn't have Fukushima and they had to up all the fossil fuels, a total of 3,426 additional deaths plus 31,300 serious ailments.
Wow.
It is also important to note there were no recorded deaths due to radiation as a result of Fukushima, and all the hype around thyroid cancer because of the radioactive iodine that was released. Officially, there is no way that we can say they were caused by the iodine,
No.
because the amount of time required before that iodine gets into the thyroid to produce cancer has not yet expired. So that appears to have been a random fluctuation. That should not have been anything to do with the nuclear reactor.
No, but try telling the media that.
Try telling the media that.
Public opinion is a powerful thing.
is.
Indeed,
It
in
is.
this case, it's all that matters. You can speak all the sense you want in the world, all the scientific rationalism. It doesn't matter in the end because of the way our culture is set up. That the media dictates truth.
Just look at Germany, famous for getting hit by earthquakes and
tsunamis.
tsunamis all the
Closing
time.
down
And
all of
after
it.
Fukushima closed down every single one of its nuclear power plants because it was scared of.
An example of
Fukushima,
the oversight that we're talking about that is the cause for why these accidents happen is they put the transformer coils and the backup power generators that power the cooling system that keep the reactors safe. They put them in a basement on the ocean side instead of on the land side.
Genius.
On
Absolute
the ocean
genius.
side, when
Yes.
they know
Good-
there's
good-
a chance.
good planning
it's
there.
just so that's the sort of thing that is unsafe. Nuclear power is safe. People aren't safe.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think one of the things we could also give credit for is the fact that there was an earthquake and a
I
tsunami,
know.
and the thing
Didn't melt down.
still didn't melt down.
Yeah.
imagine.
Anything
you
else?
can't think of anything other than perhaps a hurricane appearing that would make a nuclear meltdown that would be a more dramatic incident, and it still didn't melt down.
Absolutely, yes.
Still...
In fact, it's a ringing endorsement for nuclear power. The whole Fukushima incident was a perfect example that it worked exactly as advertised.
Yeah. And just lastly, before we move on to some of the moral, ethical stuff,
yes,
because I just realised that this show could be like 3 shows.
Yeah, easily.
The amount we have to talk about is coal power, right?
Yes.
If you have a coal power plant in your city, it's not going to explode. Probably not. Realistically, it's not going to explode, which means you're not going to die visibly. Now, I've just shown, in the case of Japan, how many deaths and serious ailments there were as a result of increased use of fossil fuels. So you will die. It's just that thing of the plane and the car.
It'll take you a long time.
Example compared to nuclear, right? The thing that we should also acknowledge is that our coal is dug up across the African continent. And vast swathes of people there will die from digging up our coal.
Yes. So we're fine.
So do we just not care?
No.
No, because they're off somewhere else. You can't see that.
Out of sight.
You can't see that.
Yeah.
And that is something that never gets included, even by those who are campaigning for environmental awareness, who might be campaigning against nuclear power. They don't seem to have picked up on this. The amount of death that is happening elsewhere.
No.
And that is something that should be talked about.
But that is the status quo, that is the world, the way the world is set up. It's easy to forget the amount of suffering that goes on because of Western civilization.
Right. I know we've had to skirt and dance and jump over
we have
stuff,
indeed.
But I think we're going to leave nuclear power,
Sure.
and we're going to use this to springboard
Directly into a nuclear weapon.
Yes, we're going to springboard into the issue of, more generally, in a more abstract sense, here's how I'm going to frame it. Is science justified by the act of science and therefore inherently amoral, or should each scientific discovery be validated within some form of moral framework and or context?
Science at its purest, for me, is a search for truth. That is a moral act. That is a good act, I would argue. However, the truth, that is no reflection on the truth. If we took Darwinism in its purest form and tried to put that into our society, you get something like eugenics, which is bad morally. So science finds truths. It is then the job of either philosophers or politicians to make moral judgments about what science has found. Whether it is morally bad to use a nuclear weapon, I would argue. But that doesn't mean that science shouldn't have found it. We have to give science the freedom to roam for knowledge without being constrained. Especially I think this links into things like stem cells in the US, where for about 10 years the entire scientific ability of the US to advance in that area was held back because of
federal legislation.
Yeah, federal legislation that made no sense scientifically.
Now, I am sitting between the two other physicists in the
Yes.
studio, and I'm aware that they are going to. That Harry probably agrees with half of what you said, and then vehemently disagrees with the other half.
That's exactly it. Yes.
Yeah. And that Tom probably disagrees with everything you said.
Perhaps. Well, some parts I agreed with. I mean, I thought about this yesterday, and I thought I'd try to sum it up in four sentences from start to finish, which is that humans want to fill the void, fill the darkness of the unknown. I think religion is a good evidence for that. Therefore, the discovery of what is and isn't, i.e. scientific research, is a basic human urge. It's a human necessity. Second point is, tangentially, science is a search for what is and isn't, and therefore void of morality. Science is the observation of what is. It either is a pen in my hand or it isn't. And any subsequent knowledge gained from this observation is also void of morality by definition. However, how we apply our newfound knowledge is what is judged by people as moral. And therefore, to sum it up, science is amoral, but people are moral.
I like that. I do like that. So I think I'm kind of sitting on the fence between you two.
I don't think so. I think he agrees with me almost entirely. I said that science is a search for truth unencumbered by moral.
I agree with that.
Unencumbered by morality. And it is for the people following the rest of civilization following on behind. If science is at the frontier, to pick up what science has packaged by finding these new discoveries and decide what to do with them.
Yeah,
and decide how to apply.
What I think is worth pointing out is that these kind of decisions that you're saying that should be made in a moral sense by other people than the scientists.
I agree.
They should be. They absolutely should be versed in the science itself, just as you are yourself. You're very versed in science, and therefore I would say you're perfectly qualified to be one of these people, perhaps.
But there's an awful lot of stupidity that happens where people pass
modern
policy
politicians
and
the media
on.
And all of this is entirely the influence of people who simply don't know what they're talking about.
An example, our government currently are the aim that we have to try and get offshore wind farms. If we started now and had all the money and it would take us about 90 years.
Indeed.
That's putting up one a day.
I believe the figure is we have one boat in the country capable of doing
these
this.
decisions are being made by people who seem to just not know what's going on.
That is why I tried to add, I don't know, particularly successfully at the end of my thing, a caveat that science has to be allowed to roam. While the people coming along behind should decide what they do with the scientific discoveries, they should have no reins on the people at the front.
Absolutely.
So are we arguing that since science is discovering what isn't, and that isn't necessarily... if that is a moral act, it's only a moral act because you have defined it to be a moral act in your moral system in which you value truth, and the pursuit of truth is the important thing to say, because we have to define that moral system. So if we don't put it in a moral system, it is amoral, which means you don't have to justify each individual discovery. But since we live in a real world, not just one where all you have is the discovery, you also have the application. When it comes down to the application, we have to put it into a moral framework in order to work out whether we should or shouldn't do it.
I think another, perhaps not quite so obvious, rather subtle point is how can you justify a discovery before you've discovered it?
Yes.
How do you justify splitting the atom before you've actually discovered that you can split the atom and it releases a large amount of energy?
And that's kind of what I was alluding to at the beginning when I drew this parallel with space exploration, that we don't know.
No.
While you're doing it, you don't know what's going to happen and the ramifications. All of that has to be done afterwards.
So what we're saying is it's not worth stopping yourself for all eternity on all possible discoveries on the off chance that you might misuse it.
I think that was wonderfully well put when he said you can't make a moral judgment before you discover it.
Good on you, Tom.
Yes, well done, Tom.
Okay.
So I think that draws us to a nice little close there.
Final statements. One, Mr. Manners, what is your final conclusion?
The old sage. I say that, yes, indeed, it is entirely worth keeping science unreined on the condition that everyone who has the facility to make an important decision is informed of all the facts before they do it.
Will?
I think that's rather well put. As the young pretender, I would go with science has to be let off to pursue truth, and what comes behind should be discussed in a moral context by people who understand the science. So I largely agree with you.
Yep. Tom?
As a sort of lowly apprentice, I would agree with what both of these guys said, that I'm entirely forgotten what I was about to say now. But no, a summary of what these two said, that it's you should, no matter what topic you're talking about, you should always have an informed decision, and you shouldn't just blindly make statements and have opinions about things without being able to back them up with some opinion. It doesn't matter whether your opinion is right or wrong, as long as you've got a reason for thinking it. Your point about wind farms is perfect proof of that.
Yep.
Wonderful.
And my closing statement?
Go ahead.
Is you're all right.
Lovely.
I agree.
Good. It's nice to agree.
Yeah, it is.
It helps when you're all scientists and already agreed with each other in the first place.
Harry.
Yes.
Do you know what comes next?
Oh no, it's that time, isn't it?
It's that time. It's the time of the show where we ask Harry a question.
Wonderful.
A deep and meaningful science.
So have we had something come in?
We've had quite a few come in, actually.
Oh, good.
But
so
I'm not going to give
choice.
you loads. I'm just going to give you one because we are running short on time.
This
This one has come in by email. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Stephen Hawking said eggs existed before chickens, e.g. dinosaur eggs. But British researchers cracked the enigma when they discovered that the problem necessary to create the eggshell was... Oh, my laptop just... There we go. Was found exclusively in the ovaries of chickens. So eggshells are found only in chickens, apparently. So the chicken had to come first because the eggshell can't be made without that protein. So that was a lot of you.
Yes.
Which came first, the chicken or the egg? I'm timing you. You have about a minute and a half. Go.
Well, of course, this comes down to an issue of definition of the species, because evolution is a very gradual process. So you get very slow alterations of genes in a random sense, which produce differences in the organism once it's born, and therefore may or may not make it more likely to survive. And that's how you get the gradual change of organisms. But where we define a distinct species is, in a sense, up to us. And because we don't have a complete fossil record, you just have to draw the line somewhere. And so at some point there was going to have been some creature which was born, the parent of which was not a chicken under our definition. And it laid an egg which hatched into a creature which we would have defined a chicken, and therefore the egg must have come first. So how long do I have left?
Quite a while, but that was so boring. I'm not going to...
It was kind of a simple question.
Ugh. That was really dull.
It wasn't...
I agree with him entirely, but I agree with both of you there.
Yes. Why do we include this segment, Harry?
I don't know. I should have just said something random.
You could, yeah, maybe.
What became the chicken or the egg? Well, they both came simultaneously because, of course, it was the great god Philae.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. I'm trying to make it more exciting. Anyway, we're running out of time, aren't we?
Oh dear. All right. So this has been Because the Universe. We've been asking what is nuclear power worth the discovery of the nuclear bomb, and we basically ended by saying
yes,
science is not moral. So it's the discovery that has to be put in a moral context, not the science, which is more of an act itself. So is it worth it? Well,
absolutely.
Yeah, but that's kind of not the question we should be asking.
No.
Okay. Thank you very much, guests. You have been wonderful.
Yes, thank you very much.
We've had Will and we've had Tom on. You've been brilliant. Thank you so
much.
Very much. Thank you so much. And listeners, thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you have a good rest of your weekend. If you want to tune in 2 more weeks' time, I think that's the 6th.
I think it's the 6th of
Then
December.
We're going to be asking another deep question. Ducky's already given me a hint.
Yes, I can see it in his eyes.
I'm not going to say anything to you, but it's going to be a deep one, so definitely show up for that.
So on 11 a.m. Saturday, 6th of December.
Saturday the 6th of December, joining us.
Catch us then. So we're going to go out on Master Pretender First Aid Kit. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Have a good weekend.
Hi there, me again. We hope that you enjoyed that. If you do want to be on one of our future shows, then please drop us an email at becausetheuniverse@aol.com and we will get back to you. Don't forget to tune in to our next show. It's in 2 weeks' time, so that's the 6th of December, and it's going to be a very, very deep topic. So we will see you then.